Then there's a number of ethical questions. I think, well, the most obvious are the code of conduct for federal judges requires that you do everything possible to maintain the appearance of impartiality. She's on the record in speeches, law review articles saying, I don't think judges can be impartial, and so they probably shouldn't even try. And then she's done specific things. She's just 2 months ago gave a speech raving about the election of Barack Obama. You're not supposed to do that as a judge. She's written, called very strongly for more campaign finance, criticized Congress for not doing more. I think it's quite obvious to see how that would affect her impartiality, especially since campaign finance cases regularly come before the Supreme Court, or among the most important cases coming before the Supreme Court. And don't just, don't take my word that these are ethical problems. Look at the Second Circuit that she sits on. They've already reprimanded a judge for criticizing Bush. So, criticizing Bush, praising Obama, should there be a complaint against her, I think they'd have a hard time not reprimanding her, frankly, if they still have jurisdiction over her, if she hasn't yet moved on to the Supreme Court. There were also her statements endorsing judicial activism. Again, where she's used, speech after speech talked about how, the rule of law, objective rule of law is unattainable. She's come very close to saying that it's really a tool of the white man used to oppress minorities, and that judges, appellate judges, are policymakers. Again, she's been unusually forthright about that, but it does make her more vulnerable now. And also getting back to the ethics question, we have the way she's buried. Her most important and controversial decisions are ones that she dealt with in brief per curiam opinions that barely touched on, and sometimes didn't touch on at all, the important constitutional questions. Now, for those of you who are not lawyers, per curiam opinions 99% of the time are used because it's an uninteresting, unimportant issue and it's not worth writing a long opinion. In rare occasions, they're used basically to avoid avoid having to take responsibility for the opinion, and that's clearly the second category is where she falls. Now, if you do that once, maybe, but if all your most important decisions fall in that category, I think that's a problem and that's a pattern, and she's going to be asked about that. Senators have already have mentioned that. She's made other injudicious statements over the years, and I think, frankly, one of her problems is that she's opinionated, and you could say she has loose lips, and I think that's going to haunt her when she gets to the hearing. I think she's going to be more like a Bork at the hearings than she will. She probably won't be, she has 20 years of experience to look on, but I don't think she's going to be able to be as restrained as an Alito or a Roberts. Now, again, as I alluded to earlier, some Republicans have predicted that, some observers have predicted that Republicans would roll over the way they did with Ginsburg. And I don't know if that's even fair. I don't want to blame anyone here, but the point is there could have been very vigorous opposition to Ginsburg. As general counsel of the ACLU and in other parts of her career, she had said all kinds of outrageous things. She had said that Mother's and Father's Day should be abolished. She had said prisons should be co-ed. She had said that the right to privacy probably protects bigamy and prostitution. I had a list of a dozen things like that when I looked at it. Probably one or two of those would have been enough to stop her, but there were only 3 votes against her. I don't think that's going to happen this time. I think all indications are Republicans realize that this is an issue that works in their favor, especially in the last few days. Republicans have started to get quite vigorous. And frankly, before that, she deserved. You should not come out on the first day and denounce a nominee. You should keep an open mind. But as you look at the record, I think it's fair to raise the questions that you have. And in those last few days, the senators have addressed issues like her 12 years on the board of the Puerto Rican Legal Defense and Education Fund. They took some pretty radical positions, all of which, by the bylaws, had to be approved by Sotomayor, who even was head of the board at one point. They've talked about Ricci, the case where she favored racial preferences, again, without any explanation of why. I won't get into that much because I know that Roger's going to talk about that, except to say that, that's a great example with the problem with the empathy standard, which is, who should you be empathetic for? Should you be empathetic for the minority firefighters who didn't do well on the New Haven civil service exam, and that's why the exam results were thrown out? Or should you be empathetic for someone like Ricci, who spent hundreds of hours and thousands of dollars studying for it and did well? Again, who should you be empathetic for? And that's why liberals like that standard, because really you can be empathetic for whoever you want, and so it really is just an excuse for legislating from the bench. And since a lot of people think that elite lawyers are better at deciding the nation's great social issues than the unwashed masses, for example, in California. And the masses aren't even very unwashed in California. They're quite liberal, but still people think you can't leave important decisions like gay marriage up to the people, even liberal people. So anyway, that's why they like this standardless standard for judging. They've also stressed the Second Amendment in the last yesterday, especially. GOP senators held a press conference and stressing the Second Amendment, talked about it on the floor. And I think that's really a key issue. The group that we think of, the interest group that we think of as most important in opposing judicial activism is the pro-life groups. But the Second Amendment folks, supporters of gun rights, have potential to be much more influential. They're certainly just as large. But red state Democrats listen to them, are afraid of them. Pro-life group, they've already sort of factored in that they're going to be criticized for being pro-choice. But again, in states where gun rights are important, and there are Democrats, Alaska, Montana, the Dakotas, Virginia, Arkansas, Louisiana, where Democrats are basically afraid to anger the NRA and other gun rights groups. And, like I said, this is a constituency that hasn't been involved before, largely because the Second Amendment was effectively non-justiciable. And by non-justiciable, I mean not something determined by the courts. But the big Heller decision, and tomorrow will be the first anniversary of that, changed all that. It really put the issue in the courts the way that Roe put the abortion issue in the courts 35 years ago. Really all the important aspects of the Second Amendment now are really up to the judges and largely the Supreme Court, whether it applies just in D.C. or whether it's incorporated to the states, what the standard of review is. Heller really did not give us a standard of review. And again, if any of you are lawyers, you know that the standard of review makes all the difference in the world, whether it's closer to rational basis or strict scrutiny. And even if one of the 5 center-right justices are replaced by Obama, then really even the survival of Heller at all, the Second Amendment at all as an individual right is imperiled. Again, there's every reason for the gun rights groups to get involved, but we really didn't know. It was somewhat speculation until yesterday. Gun Owners of America had gotten involved. Other prominent Second Amendment advocates had gotten involved. But the NRA's top leadership had been silent. And that changed yesterday because leading member of the NRA board, Sandy Froman, her past president of the NRA, lifetime member of their executive council, quite aggressively urged opposition to Sonia Sotomayor in her op-ed that just came out yesterday evening. She's the top legal mind at the NRA. She's former law professor at Harvard Law School grad.
Where's that op-ed?
Town Hall is the first place I saw it, at least. And she, one thing I liked is she talked about, she really talked about it in political terms, which is how one has to look at it. She said, the gun issue stopped Gore. It helped to defeat Kerry. There's no reason we can't do it again with Sotomayor.